Some breaking news when it comes to the Tesla Tower update. Below Natural has recently posted some early screenshots of the Tesla Tower. Now, do bear in mind that when it comes to the Tesla Tower, the developers are still working on this tower, meaning that this is not the finished product. But as Below Natural states here, shocking news, the Tesla Tower can shock enemies. For some reason, some people were thinking that it couldn't shock enemies and it was going to be nothing like the electroshocker, which can slow down enemies while dealing damage to it. No, the Tesla Tower is very similar to the electroshocker, but took a second swing at rewriting the Tesla Tower. We're getting somewhere, implying that the first time that the developers made the Tesla Tower, it wasn't fully up to standards which they expected. For your information, this is a very early work in progress, lots to come to this tower before it launches. Yes, that's very clear because as you can see here, the model that's being used is a grey humanoid model, and in Tower Defense Simulator you obviously know that a grey humanoid model is not the norm. I guess you could consider some units to have the grey humanoid model, but that was in the past and many of them do have actual skin tones. But when it comes to this Tesla Tower, you can very clearly see the inspiration for the design is from, well, they've already planned the design out, but additionally they do have a attacking animation, and it looks like this attacking animation for the Tesla Tower, it looks like the Tesla coil generates some sort of thing, it shoots at it, but then it also has an ability to thunderstrike it from above. Now, I'm not sure why in this case there wasn't a Tesla bolt from the sky. Maybe it was a glitch animation because it doesn't look like these things, well, it actually does look like they are slowed down, but there's no damage indicators. Now, looking at the developmental screenshots, it looks like that this is the level 0 version of the Tesla Tower, meaning that this is the weakest version. And additionally, we have to look here and look at the towers that are being shown off here. The Commander, the Electroshocker, the Farm, the Cowboy, and the Hallopunk. All of these looks like they have actually got their statistics, so it doesn't look like this Tesla Tower is in the hotbar for Below Natural. So it looks like Below Natural may have generated it himself, or it looks like it could be from like a developmental place which has the model of the Tesla Tower already placed down, rather than the Below Natural placing it down. So it doesn't look like it has full statistics when Below Natural tests this out. But additionally, it does look like that it is able to one-shot a normal or abnormal, as you can see here. It's able to deal full damage towards them. So from the looks of things, it looks like it can deal full damage and splash damage really to certain enemies. So as you can see here, it dealt like full damage to a abnormal, which I'll calculate later, but also it was able to deal damage to 2 abnormals there. But also with the shock, with the aftershock I guess, it was also able to slow down enemies afterwards, so as you can see there. So it looks like the slowing down ability from the Tesla Tower comes from the tower itself, but then there's also damage from above. So it looks like these are independent of each other, and it does look like this shock from the smaller shot from the Tesla Tower is able to also damage enemies, because as you can see here, this abnormal was able to die from it. Now obviously, this being a work in progress, this shock from above, this may not actually be connected to the tower, and Below Natural just testing things out. There could be like, I don't know, an admin command somewhere off screen that Below Natural is testing, and it may not be from this Tesla Tower itself. But in any case, it does look like the Tesla Tower is very similar to the Electroshocker in that it can slow down enemies, it may be able to deal minimal damage to them, but also a lot of damage through a electric bolt from the sky, whether that be a level 4 ability, whether it be an ability from the Tesla Tower itself. Because, as mentioned in the Tesla Tower description for its addition, it says it has an active ability to help even for game modes, like Fallen, implying that this is an ability that bypasses the no stun ability, but these enemies that are shown off here, they don't have no stun, so it's not really tested out fully here, so we will have to wait and see what this fully entails later on. An active ability implies that Below Natural didn't have to activate anything, which does seem to be true. There is no keybinds attached to the Tesla Tower, so it does look like it just randomly happens, which helps you out in game modes like Fallen, like this is. Or, well, it could actually be Molten mode. I suspect it is Fallen mode because it looks like there are about 14 gumdrops that are collected here by Below Natural, and like obviously Fallen mode has 13. 14 could come from like a different wave, for example, or like boosted through the Battle Pass boost, which may be active in this developmental place. But interestingly enough, this isn't sandbox mode. The reason why I know it's not sandbox mode is because there is the advent of the timescale here. If it was sandbox mode, timescale wouldn't exist here. It would exist down here, which you could modify up to like 100 times. Whereas here, you can only modify it to 2 times. So it looks like for some reason, Below Natural is in a game where there's a fallen mode, but also the dev map. Again, this is very likely to be a testing place rather than actual tower defense simulator, and it's just the first showings of the Tesla Tower shown off here. Nevertheless, Below Natural does mention "Welcome back, old Electroshocker, my beloved," implying that this has the hallmarks of the original Electroshocker in Tower Defense Simulator. For those that don't know, the first version of the Electroshocker Tower had a Tesla coil from level 2 onwards. It's not the exact same, and in fact it's not remotely the same as the versions that are seen in Tower Defense Simulator, although if you upgrade it, it kind of looks, this level 2 version kind of looks like this level 5 version, but not exactly the same, and far reworked from, or remodeled, sorry, from the original version. But with that being said, the statistics of the original Electroshocker from back in the day, all the way up until the overhaul update, because there was a midterm buff to it in the March 2020, basically what happened was that it was a low damage-ish tower that fired at a slow fire rate. It had a shock time that was actually relatively low, but it could actually hit a lot of enemies, which the current Electroshocker, it can hit a lot of enemies, but not early on. Early on, with its Electroshocker's upgrades, it can hit like a maximum of 3 enemies, but if you upgrade it to level 4 and level 5, yeah, sure, it can hit up to, I believe, 7 enemies, but it only deals high damage to them, whereas the secondary ability where it slows down enemies isn't fully attached to it. But sure, the Electroshocker back there, well, the current Electroshocker can slow down enemies quite significantly actually, but because of its slow fire rate, is quite a high damage tower rather than a slowing down tower. Whereas the Tesla Tower, it looks like it occupies the niche from the Electroshocker back in the day, where it can actually hit a lot of enemies early on, but not deal a lot of damage, except for its active ability, where it looks like it deals a lot of damage to enemies. If it is an active ability, I would assume that it would scale with the tower's level, but currently it looks like the lightning bolts that the Tesla Tower generates deals at least 8 damage, because that is the health of abnormal enemies in fallen mode. As for how much the Tesla coil itself can deal, it looks like possibly 1 or 2. This abnormal shown off here looks like it's dealt a small amount of damage from these Tesla bolts that came from the lightning, but also maybe the splash damage that came from the lightning as well. It may be the case where the lightning has a max hits though, so we don't know about that. Below Natural also mentions that he may be working on a Paintballer rework too, and actually this is the first time that we've had outright confirmation that Tower Defense Simulator is getting a Paintballer rework. It's not mentioned anywhere in the roadmap, which has led some people to say that the Paintballer rework is not coming anytime soon. That may not be the case. These reworks aren't necessarily going to be on a public roadmap because they are, in relatively speaking when it comes to features, small scale enough. But that being said, a Paintballer rework, which probably would include a whole redesign of the Paintballer Tower, given the fact that the design comes from 2020, I would assume would be high scale enough to be on a public roadmap, but we'll see on that. Now, the Paintballer being reworked is something overdue, because ever since 2023 there's been some suggestions that it'll get reworked, or it could get removed. So, for example, from this thing from 2023, the 15th of February 2023, there was a poll in gameplay feedback which was called something TDS discussion or something like that. It said, currently, Paintballer does not serve much purpose outside of being a joke tower, and attempting to buff him would create unnecessary competition for early game, in reference to the Demoman. The Demoman and the Paintballer, they really occupy the same niche. The only thing at the time was that the Paintballer could detect hidden enemies and the Demoman could not. Although I do think that's now reversed. The Paintballer can't see hidden enemies and the Demoman can. But that being said, many people actually prefer for the Paintballer to be buffed rather than completely outright removed. Although it is close. 682 people back then said that they wanted to remove it. 77 people said they did not. Whereas 705 people said that they would rather buff the Paintballer. So a buff for the Paintballer has been sort of muted since 2023. And in fact, back in 2023, in February, they said that there could be a gimmick for the Paintballer. So if the Paintballer got the ability to blind enemies to suppress their abilities, so for example, the Vindicator couldn't stun, the Boomer didn't explode, the Unknown didn't stomp, it could also make it distinct through statistical changes such as higher fire rate, which is actually in reference actually to lower the fire rate so that it has higher DPS, range but weak damage. DPS wouldn't outdo Demoman in mid-game, but would be considered because of its minimal support later on and decent early game power, which, I mean, that was the only suggestion really for a Paintballer rework since, because, well, the Paintballer is still sort of a forgotten tower, and the game actually does encourage you to buy the Demoman for during the tutorial rather than the Paintballer. There's also been some suggestions that the Paintballer could cost 1,000 to 1,500 coins, which was before all of the towers in Tower Defense Simulator got a slight inflation when it came to coins, because the developers realized a lot of people had a lot of coins in their accounts. It would be a stark increase into the 100 coins that you currently buy for the Paintballer, but there has also been a lot of discussions about the Paintballer rework, saying the Paintballer has reload, it will be able to shoot a fair while before having to reload, something similar and very akin to the Chiromancer currently out now, which wasn't released at the time. Gimmick 2, which is splash, very small, so it only hit very clumped enemies. Gimmick 3, slow down, it'll slow down a lot lower than other slowing towers though, and silence. Upon hitting an enemy at level 3, the said enemy won't be able to use any abilities for 5 seconds. At level 4, this slightly scales with the wave number. Now, honestly, having a tower that can actually disable the abilities of certain enemies would actually be a good thing. It would be the first time that I think that a tower has been added to Tower Defense Simulator which could do that. But for it to be a starter tower probably is not a good idea. For this to happen, I would assume the Paintball would have to be increased and would probably certainly be promoted to intermediate. Now, given the fact that there are not that many starter towers in Tower Defense Simulator, I'm not sure if the developers would want to do that. But the Paintballer being able to disable the abilities of enemies in Tower Defense Simulator would be a very nice rework for the Paintballer, a tower that's been struggling to gain attention like 2 seconds after it was added. I mean, when it was first added, it was actually a pretty decent tower. The only problem is 2 days after it was added, it was nerfed pretty much straight into the ground, and like ever since, no one's really been using the Paintballer as like an early game tower. Because I mean, like, sure, you could use the Paintballer, but you're more than likely going to use the Demo Man in comparison to the Paintballer. The only reason why people used the Paintballer back then was because the Paintballer could see hidden. It was one of the few explosive towers that could actually see hiddens, but it now can't. Well, I've lied. Since 2024, 19th of July 2024, the Paintballer could see hidden, but I forgot about that. It can't see lead detection though, so that's weird. It's one of the only explosive towers not to damage lead enemies. With that being said, there were various polls throughout 2024 which said that which of these towers should be next for a rework. Hunter, Paintballer, Medic, Turret, and Electroshocker. I think since this poll, I think all of the towers except the Paintballer have been significantly reworked. Yes, there was a minor rework to the Paintballer in the 19th of July 2024. It barely changed anything. Same for the 21st of August 2024 and the 23rd of July 2025. There've been like minimal changes to it, but not that many people still use the Paintballer despite these changes, despite it being like one of the cheapest towers to actually fully upgrade. And the most recent time that the Paintballer has been mentioned for a buff was the 30th of December 2024, nearly a year ago, where most people said that they prefer the Necromancer to be reworked, and in fact the Golden Scout pipped the Paintballer to this as well, and I think the Mortar since then has also been buffed as well, so the Paintballer is like one of the last remnants in Tower Defense Simulator that's not actually been changed. Now this also coincides with the Gladiator rework also being leaked by Below Natural a couple of days ago, in fact nearly a month ago actually. Here's with a new design actually for the Gladiator. The Paintballer redesign not been teased yet, but we'd have to assume that it is being reworked given that, well, it's been 5 years since the Paintballer was last updated. And really, out of all the evergreen towers in Tower Defense Simulator, the last 2 towers not to receive a redesign are the Paintballer and the Pyromancer. The Pyromancer in itself doesn't really need a massive rework, nor does it need a redesign per se. I think many people are actually okay with the Pyromancer having its design. The only problem is it's slightly broken in that it creates a line of fire straight up into the air. And I guess you could also consider the farm to have not changed since 2020, but I don't feel like the farm has any issues with its design. In fact, the design of the farm currently right now, while it might be considered slightly out of aspect of Tower Defense Simulator's current designs, I think it's fine, the default one at least, and all of like the skins just contribute really to the farmed skins repertoire. And like really the only skins that would really need to be updated is, I'd say, the arcade farm, because the arcade farm and the tycoon farm actually, they were made in a time when Tower Defense Simulator wasn't that detailed, and like maybe there's a case for the Christmas farm as well, but I'd say certainly every skin after like the ducky skin for the farm has been at the very least all right in comparison to skins right now, but also pretty good. And when you include event towers into the fray, the only towers we're really looking at here is the Gladiator, the Toxic Gunner, and maybe the Executioner as towers that significantly need a redesign. The Gladiator we know is going to get a redesign, the Toxic Gunner not so much, the Executioner not so much as well, but I'd assume the Toxic Gunner Executioner are next in line for a redesign, whereas the Elf Camp, I just don't think the Elf Camp's really going to get a redesign, despite it being slightly updated now. Many people have asked for a rework of the Elf Camp in the upcoming Christmas event, but I don't think you're going to get it.